Hello, welcome to another session. And today we are going to be talking about ideation. We are going to be talking about how do we come up with ideas. But before we get to that, this was the previous step on extracting the need statement. And I just wanted to talk about a few things before and just build on that before we get into how actually we come up with ideas. Um, in that previous episode, and you can just go check it out on the define stage, uh, we I really did emphasize that this is a very critical phase because if you get this wrong, whatever you do from this stage onwards tends to be wrong. And this is a critical phase because what we are doing at this phase, in a nutshell, is looking at the statements that you are getting from the ground, the people you talked to at the empathy stage, analyzing that information to identify a pattern, and then from that pattern, try to find an insight on what do these people really need? What is the exact need here? And it's tricky because nobody is telling you the need as it is. It is up to you to sit down and ask yourself, what do these real people need? To look at the intention behind the words. And I remember I gave an example of if you went back in time before the introduction of vehicles and engines and all that. If you asked people then what they needed, they were like, I need a faster horse because they don't have any concept of a car. All they can say, all they can relate to is what they have been using, that is a horse. So it is up to you to sit back and look at the data they are giving you that I need to move from point A to point B quickly, much faster. I need to move from point A to point B in a sheltered manner where I'm not getting rained on. It's up to you to look at all those insights, all that information. It's up to you to look at all that information and ask yourself as the innovator, what do these people really need? And it's that insight that's going to set the foundation for brainstorming and coming up with ideas. So if you get this statement wrong here, the need statement, if you get this wrong, if you misread it, if you don't get the real need from the people you're building for, it tends to be a bit, you tend to solve the wrong problem. And we know the consequence of that. People end up not using your solution, and then it's just another dusty project that collects dust somewhere, right? So if you want to build something that people will use and pay you for, actually, you need to address the need, their need. So this step is very critical. And so you have to take a little bit of time here and tell us what is the need. It is very important to have this need statement really done well. And you can try and validate this by, for example, when you're starting, I told you to look at a problem area that is personal to you, that you have some sort of experience. You can match this to that experience. Is this really what you need that you're facing? And you can even ask some of your friends who are facing the same problem. Does this need reflect the problem that they are facing? So this is a very critical phase, and I just wanted to emphasize that before we get into ideation. And ideation, just from the word, it's ideas. And I know a lot of us are probably very excited, and I think this is one of the most interesting phases, because over here and a lot of people have ideas. And it's okay. It's very good to be excited about this phase. But the attitude and the mindset I want you to have starting this phase is that, first of all, ideas are cheap, right? Any person can have an idea. So ideas are cheap. So don't fall in love with the idea, right? The ideas that you come up with. Focus on the problem you set out to solve. Obsess on the problem. Don't obsess on the ideas, right? When it comes to ideation, it's a creative engine. It's of design thinking, and the attitude here is normally to generate as many ideas as possible, even the crazy ones. You know what? At this stage, we want them. whether an idea will work or not. At this phase, it's more of how many ideas, right? Not even quality. We don't really care about quality, we care about that at the tail end. But at this point, most of the time when we are starting, we care about quantity over quality. And the mindset here is that there are no bad ideas, right? And the key question that you need to ask yourself in ideation stage is, how might we solve, this problem? How might we address this need, right? uh, in a way that no one has tried before. Because again, what we are doing is innovation. There has to be a unique approach, so you can't just copy paste what other people have done. You need to ask yourself, how do we do it in a way that another person has not done it before? Or if it has been done before, how do we improve on the already existing ideas out there, to have a greater impact, or to make it cheaper, or make it more affordable? There are many, many ideation techniques out there. We can't possibly go of all of them, but these are some of them, like a brainstorming. And I think for this series, you're going to be talking about brainstorming. But Scamper also is very handy. Scamper is used to modify existing solutions. So, for example, if you are trying to come up with a student portal, another student portal, you can be like, well, you can look at the already existing student portal in the university, and you can use the scamper technique to identify areas that you can improve, so that at the end of the day you have a better student portal that you can, maybe sell to the university. So that's scamper. Brainstorming is generally used for new ideas, right? We also have the crazy eights. Crazy eights is again a very good idea, has a lot of relationship with brainstorming. When you talk about brainstorming and talk about ideation generally, creativity is very key. If you are to generate ideas, you need to get creative. Look, this is innovation, and I have seen a lot of people coming, and they have a problem they are addressing. Very good. They already have a need they have identified, and the need makes sense. They already know the people they are targeting. They have the statistics. But when it comes to presenting the solution, they present a solution that has nothing unique about it. It's nothing creative about this solution. And you have to realize that when you talk about innovation, when you talk about startups, uniqueness and novelty is a key quality. And whether you stand in front of, Shark Tank, where you stand before, I don't know, this other type of investors out there, they will always ask, what's so unique about your solution? What makes your solution different from the already existing ones? So creativity has to be there. We have to see originality. There has been a lot of studies done about creativity, and what we see about creativity is that people have different levels of creativity. Some seem to be portraying more, levels of creativity. Others mid, others, a low level of creativity. And there has been a lot of research done in this area, and you know it's it's a good question to ask, whether, when you talk about people like Thomas Edison, when you talk about Albert Einstein, the people who right now we regard as the most creative people that have ever existed, at least uh, in human history, we tend to ask, were these people born this way? Is it that they encountered something in their early years that made them, this creative and these genius people? Were they mad? Right? Because some of the theories that they presented at that time, it was very easy to think that they were mad. But research shows that we are all born creative. You and me, everyone, we are all born creative. But some people forget how to be creative as they grow up. And I'm going to explain this. Um, See, when you give a child, a small child, you give that child a carton, maybe a carton, a biscuit carton, right? An empty one. When you give it to that child, uh, this child doesn't know what is possible, what's not possible. So you may come later and you find that that carton has been converted to a small car toy and they're dragging it with wheels and everything. You can come later and find that it is a boat, right? That it's floating, shaped it. You may come back later and find that they have, it's a flying sort of toy where they just drew it and it just floats around in the air. And that's great levels of creativity. They do not know what's possible, what's not possible. They don't know the limitations. But somehow, as that child grows, as they are forced to embrace modern society, as they are forced to, as they are told how to behave, how not to behave, as they are through education, as they are taught what's possible, what's not possible, that tends to change, and they start thinking in a different. We all start thinking in a different way, uh, because you find, and that's a key ingredient. That's the mindset we need to have when we talk about creativity. That we need to think like children. We need to ask, what can this be apart from what it is right now? Um, so a lot of people, as they conform to modern society, uh, see limitations, a lot of limitations. You can't dress this way, you can't do it this way, you can't, you know, talk this way, you can't move like this. And as a child, those limitations do not exist. You are free to think, you are imaginative. But as you grow older, because of education, because of the society around you, as you conform to civility and all that, then that aspect tends to really, really, really fade. I'll give you an example of maybe Coco Chanel. And during her time, where women fashion was heavily determined by men, where the men, the giant industries were dominated by men designing clothes for women. And at that time, that's how it was. There was a way for women to dress. Well, it was not comfortable for sure. I don't know. That's what the research says, but it was it was very limiting, and for the women at that time, they knew that we had to dress this way, right? This is what the industry, this is what the world expects us to dress. But you find Coco Chanel coming up and defying that, and coming up and putting away that norm of what is normal, what are the limitations, and putting that away and deciding, you know what, I'm gonna come up with what I think we should dress, and coming up with designs of clothes, especially women clothes and fashion that at that time did not even seem normal, right? At that time, uh, those designs dared what was normal. Those designs defied the possibilities at that time, defied the limitations at that time. So you have to sort of defy, you have to sort of unlearn these biases and norms that the society has pressed upon you to be creative, to push the boundaries a little bit. I don't know if that makes sense. When we talk about creativity, there are some characteristics of creativity. Here we are talking about novelty and usefulness. When you talk about novelty, it's about originality, it's about uniqueness. How unique is your idea? Uh, When you talk about usefulness, here we're talking about the usefulness of that unique idea. For example, before the basketball, the ball, the rounded ball, before the innovation of that, uh, maybe the team or the people who came up with that, it was a new design of a ball, right? So there was some novelty. But imagine if they designed a ball that was square, right? Yes, it's new, it's novel, but it's not really useful, right? Are you seeing that? Because you can't bounce it around, of course, doing the things that ball is supposed to do becomes a bit challenging. So it is very possible to come up with a very unique idea, a novel idea. So be able to strike characteristic one, but the idea is not useful. It's not implementable. It's not effective. And a lot of people find themselves here that you're coming up with a very good idea. Again, number one, but you're not fitting criteria number two. It's not feasible, it's not practical. For example, you find, I don't know, some of the ideas that it came up again in the 1800s and early 1900s, some designs of buildings. They were really nice, they were novel, but at that time we just simply didn't have the technology to make that work. So yes, they were novel, but at that time they were not feasible. It's only years later, as our our technology has improved and our research has improved, that we're able to actually implement the designs, you know. So, but for us, as we continue, we want to look at those two aspects. That whatever you come up with has to be unique, but again, has to be useful. It has to be effective, right? It has to be practical. Practical based on the resources that we have. You have to look around. Do we have these resources? It has to be implementable. How easy is it to implement? Do we need an entire government to implement? So these are the factors you have to look at, and these are some of the characteristics of creativity. But there is something I want us to discuss about, really, about creativity and the people, and how we can enhance creativity. And we have talked about the characteristics of creativity, but there are also some components of creative people. And if you want to be creative, these are some of the components that you should have. Uh, the first component is expertise. You cannot be creative in an area that you have no knowledge about. Let me repeat that. You cannot be creative in an area that you have no knowledge about. You find yourself being creative in an area that you have expertise in. So you are a nurse. It's very easy to be creative around that industry because you understand it. You see the gaps. You have a bigger length around that field, and it's very easy to be creative around that. So expertise and knowledge is very important. Technical, procedural, intellectual knowledge about what you're working on. So if you were to come up with an idea that's going to work, and a unique idea, the first thing you need to have is expertise. If you're going to come up with this revolutionary software platform, well, you need to have a software engineer person on your team, or you need to be a software engineer yourself, right? The second thing, you need to be creative, and another key ingredient of creativity is motivation. Coming up with ideas sometimes can be challenging, and as I've said, ideas are cheap, and what you need at this point is intrinsic motivation. That inherently inside you, you are motivated to continue moving. Some ideas will work, some ideas will not work. Sometimes you're going to hit barriers. Sometimes people are going to shoot down your ideas. Sometimes, there are a lot of things that can happen. You need to have intrinsic motivation. The other thing I want to talk about is creative thinking skills. Yes, there are some skills you need to have to be creative, and we're going to talk about that in a few. But let's talk about each component, like expertise. You can never be too knowledgeable about a certain field. You can never have too much knowledge about anything. And the real problem is not having enough knowledge, right? When you talk about creative thinking skills, uh, there are some things in creative thinking skills that you can embrace. One of them is what you call analogical thinking. And in analogical thinking is the methodology where we transfer knowledge and ideas from one area to fit to a different, sometimes almost different, like completely different domain. Um, so, for example, I was giving this example. I don't know if it's here. Yes, it's here. I don't know, when I was a child, uh, back then, I really like to watch not Superman. I really like to watch Spider-Man, and I don't know which movie specifically, but there's this movie about Dr. Lizard, and this guy, an impaired hand. So this doctor, through his research and his creative thinking capabilities, realizes that there's a form of a lizard that if you chop maybe a leg or a tail, that leg or tail grows back. So he realizes that, and he tries to take learnings and research from that lizard and try to apply it in human DNA. Do you see what I mean? Analogical thinking, trying to transfer knowledge of ideas from one area or from a different species to another different species. And this form, and of course, he is successful, he comes up with a unique solution, and it works for a time, but then other things happen and it's another whole issue. But that form of analogical thinking, of transferring knowledge from one area and applying to a different area and making it work, that has been the growth of so many big industries, right? And there's a lot that I can mention. And for example, with some of the fighter jets that you see, especially in the US military, designs and all that copied from, I don't know, for example, birds like falcons,